contacted Bill, and we could get a grant to teach adult education if we could get a match. So I went down to tribal council and got a match, and we started an adult education program here.
At the high school?
Yeah, the high school. Did it in the evening. And really successful. And we had these guys who were trying to stay out of the Vietnam War. They're, what they call those positions? They had Peace Corps volunteers. And Peace Corps volunteers were here and they'd bring these people in. And we had a really successful program. And so then, they got their GEDs and, then what then, and I tried to get a grant to get a bus that would leave up by Elmo and go all the way to Missoula and drop them off at different places. I wasn't ahead of my time. I didn't know that, but they had these buses in Appalachia at that time doing that. They had steady carols on the buses and everything. But anyway, the Earl Barlow was at Browning High School. He was a superintendent of public schools at Browning, and his grant writer got hired by Flathead Valley. His name was Bill Haw.
Flathead Valley Community College?
Yeah. And so Bill Haw Barlow said, "You get us some money for a college over here," because they'd heard about Navajo Community College was going then, and there was some colleges in South Dakota that were going. And so Bill Haw wrote a grant, and it wasn't funded. So the next year he expanded to include this reservation, and it got funded. And by that time I was kind of wearing out as a high school principal, so I signed on to be the director of that program.
So what size was that original amount of the grant?
It was a $100,000 grant, and so we hired. It was to serve the Blackfeet Reservation, this reservation, and Flathead County.
On $100,000 bucks.
$100,000. That was a lot of money in those days. My salary was 20 plus fringe, so that left 75 or 77. And then we had a director here, and then we had to put more money at Blackfeet. It was written that way. There was a director and a secretary at Blackfeet. And right away Blackfeet wanted a college, and they right away did all the paperwork and established their college. And so then I just took the same paperwork, and I was on the tribal council here, and we established our college.
What year was that, Joe?
That was 76. So it was just a college on paper, really. But we had money to offer classes. And so here we offer classes through Flathead Valley, and at Blackfeet we offer classes through Flathead Valley there. And start them right off, being like real colleges. Like the director here was the president, and Carol Juneau was the president there. That's when Carol got started. And that's the way it started.
So, do you remember how many students you started with?
Well, we had a program. The Polson School gave us a classroom and an office building and a school that they've since, replaced. And we were there. We just had a handful of students. And we got because I was a high school principal, I knew that if we could get into the school, if we'd hire the high school teacher and use their facilities, it was a lot easier. So we hired the math teacher at Hot Springs, and he taught college algebra. We hired the typing teacher at Arley and taught typing, did that kind of stuff. And got it started, had 30 or 40 students. In the meantime, we were working legislation through Congress to support tribal colleges. And so we were following that legislation. Had already passed the Senate when we got started, and it was to get it through the House. And so we read the legislation and got all of our ducks in order here at Blackfeet. So if legislation ever got passed, we would be qualified. So that was our goal. And then getting it passed. And I was on the tribal council, and they let me travel and spend money. So we got really active in getting the House passage of it. And then after we got the House passed, then the big question was to get Jimmy Carter to sign it, because they said Jimmy wouldn't sign any new programs. And so that was a neat activity too, getting that signed. And
did you work with President Carter?
I worked with, he had his Secretary of education at that time was Ernie Boyer, and met Ernie Boyer through this effort, and later became really good friends, and he talked Jimmy into signing the legislation.
Huh, that's cool, Joe.
Yeah.
Really. So did it start out as Salish Kootenai College?
Yeah.
That was always the name of it?
Yeah.
And then the Blackfeet was always Blackfeet Tribal College?
Yeah, community college.
Community college?
We all used community college names, and then later it seemed like the name we thought when we were fundraising that community sounded like, Miles City, Flathead, and they already had money, they didn't need money. So we dropped the community for that.
I see.
Just call it Salish Kootenai College. And I think Blackfeet still uses CC, Community College.
Well, do you remember your first graduating class? When was that?
It was probably, what happened here is the tribe had already entered into a contract with Flathead Valley to deliver their forest technology program here. And they'd already had a contract to deliver their human services technology. So that was going on. And with my position at Flathead Valley, there I was on their staff, they made me the director of those programs. And we were trying to establish ourselves in student body now, so we just claimed those students. And so our first graduation was probably 1978. It was those forest technology graduates. We had it up at the outdoor campground at Polson, had beer and steak, had the president of Flathead Valley there, and passed out their diplomas and shook their hand there.
How many students were you talking about?
There was about eight or so. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Some of them, a couple of them went on back up to Flathead Valley and went through their ceremony too with the cap and gown and all. They wanted to do that.
Well, now when you go through there, it's a beautiful campus. I mean, when were you last connected with the college, with Salish Kootenai?
2010.
2010, and what was your position then?
President.
So 2010, so we're talking 22 years and
32 years.
32 years.
Yeah.
And so what did it look like when you left? How many graduates? What kind of budget?
Our budget was like 26 million, and we had about 180 to 200 graduates.
Were they all native kids, or?
No, we kept our admissions open for a couple of reasons. We kept them open for reasons that so many families are mixed here, where a guy will have a wife who has kids that's not Indian, and then they'll be married and they'll have kids, and so you'll have kids that are not Indian and kids that are, and so we wanted to serve them, and sometimes those had cases where then the marriage didn't last, and the single head of the household is left there with all these kids, and she's white. And then being rural, we're arguing that it's hard for people that they're locked up here, with family and all. They can't go to Missoula or Flathead Valley, and for that reason we kept our place open. And then politically, it was just good politically to do that. We stayed off of everybody's radar. We just kind of worked under the radar.
Yeah. Well, how come it's impressive how beautiful that campus is. Well, why is that? I mean, is that something that comes naturally to you, or did you have somebody doing that kind of planning, or what's?
A lot of different things went into it. When we first selected when I first started, I kind of envisioned a Hutterite type colony, big Hutterite buildings. Would have a kitchen and a kind of a dining room work as a classroom, and in the corner would be a library, and then you'd have some classrooms, that type of a buildings. And they have that in New Zealand. That's what the Maoris are using. They'll take a big box, they'll buy a box store, take the box store, and they'll put different parts of the college all through the box. I didn't have that grandiose idea, but while I was a year, I went to the University to finish my doctorate. I had to take a year off to do it.
What was that in?
In school administration. And so my assistant, Jerry Slater, took over as the president. And while he was there, he had his chance to select, they were going to give him some land for a college. And he selected across the highway from the tribal office. It was all a wooded area in those days. A wooded area. And And we had gotten in line for a building that we were going to get with some kind of federal dollars. I can't remember. It had to do with Indian Self-Determination Act. There was some money that came to help tribes get ready to contract these programs ahead of time. And so the first building was built with that money. It was built, where it still stands there. And we had an architect design it. So it was an attractive building. And then we needed another one, so we borrowed money from the tribe to build the second building. I'd come back by then, and we had the same architect design that building. And the Job Corps built that one for us. We bought the material and they did the work. So that was our first two buildings. And then there was a program called, what did they call that program? It was where it was under CETA, and they did a housing improvement program. The BIA acronym was HIP, Housing Improvement Program. So the tribe got HIP dollars, and they were using CETA employees to do this remodeling, and they needed help. So we got a grant to do vocational studies. One of our first big grants, and one of it was carpentry. So we talked the tribe into letting us train those HIP employees. They'd come to class 2 days a week, and then 2 days a week they'd be on the job, and the fifth day our instructors would go out on the job and be there with them. That was very successful. And so out of that we got a building. They came through and they looked and saw what pitiful building we had. Give us money for it. And that building still stands. So we had 3 buildings. And those carpenters got pretty good, and I said, do you think you could build a garage? And, oh yeah, they could build a garage. And so these 2 carpenters, they were a former contractor and a former instructor of the Job Corps. They knocked this 6-car garage out in no time at all. So I thought, could you build a classroom building? Yeah, they could build a classroom building. Well, we should get an architect. No, we don't need an architect. They said, we don't need an architect. We don't need that. We can do that because they just go to books and stuff. So anyway, so they designed the second classroom, which is kind of like a Hutterite building. But it was a very good building, really good space, and built for about not very much a square foot. And so with that, then we had them build a library building. We got library construction dollars. And they built it the same way, did their own design and built it. And then I borrowed money again, and we built the building where the nurses are. And they built that. And so then I thought, no, I think it's time we get back to architects.